Hey guys, welcome back. Today on The Untidy Artist, I'll be showing you how to make this beautiful pinecone flower wreath. I saw a wreath like this years ago and loved it and decided it would be a fun thing to put together for this winter. I did watch a lot of videos on YouTube. I will link the ones below that were the inspiration for this. And with that said, let's grab some supplies and get started. Now, the first thing you're going to need is obviously some pine cones. Now, in a perfect world, I would have gone outside to my pine tree and picked them up off of the ground, but I've got a few feet of snow in my backyard right now. So I actually purchased these from Michael's, and the awesome thing about these is they were from Christmas. So they were clearance to 70% off. I got some of them at 80% off, and they worked really well for this tutorial. So you can purchase them. If you do use your own pine cones, you'll want to follow some steps to dry them out before you use them. I will put a link to a video below for that. I've never done it myself. As soon as my backyard thaws out, I definitely want to try it with my own pine cones. Another thing to keep in mind is not all pine cones are made alike. So the ones I'm using might be different than the ones you end up using. So you kind of have to adjust to how soft or hard they are, or how big or small they are. The ones I'm using are about 3 inches tall. And then I've got my trusty glue gun. Now I've got it set on low right now. I will turn it up to high when I start gluing things together, and you will need a lot of glue sticks. You definitely use a lot of glue to hold this all together. And then I have my wreath base. So I really like this one because I like the width of it. It gives you a nice area to put the flowers on. I got this from Michael's. I will put a link for everything used in this tutorial below. This is a 12-inch. It was also a really nice size for this wreath. You could also use embroidery hoops, and I would just leave them hooked together. Once you'll notice that you're not going to get as wide of an area to put the pinecone flowers on. I also saw these at the dollar store. They would work great. I prefer the wood base because I feel like it's more durable. The other thing you could do is trace out your own piece of cardboard and use that. But I feel like if you're going to spend all the time making this wreath, it should be something that you should be able to put up every year and have it last for quite a while. Then I have some burlap. I'll be using this to wrap around my wreath base. It enables us to glue the pinecone flowers on, and it just sticks better. Plus it gives you a nice background for the pinecones to sit against. Then you'll need some good tools. Okay, shout out to Megan from Drink Wine Be Crafty. I will put a link to her video below. It's really important to have good cutters for the pine cones, and these are by far the best I found. They're super cheap. You can get the set for around $11 on Amazon. So thank you to Megan, and I will put a link to her channel below. She's lovely. Okay, and then I've got some flat nose pliers, and then these are actually, it's a jewelry tool. I got it in a set of jewelry making stuff, and this works really well for pulling out each little piece of the pine cone. So use what you have, but also make sure that the main cutters you're using are sharp. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot harder to do this. I will be using spray paint, and this is a matte white that I'll be using. You could also use acrylic paint and a paintbrush. I think the spray paint's much easier. And with that said, let's get started. So the first step is to measure out your burlap. Now, I measured out about 4 yards and folded it over, and then I'm just cutting it in half. And I don't do a really awesome job at cutting it perfectly in half, but I'm just gonna use 1/2. Then I'm gonna take that and roll it up so I have one nice long strip of burlap that's not quite as wide. Then I'm going to cut it at an angle. I'm gonna grab my wreath base, so whatever you're using for your base, I put a small dab of glue at the top, and I'm going to wrap the burlap around it twice. Once again, this will give us a nice surface area to glue our pinecone flowers onto. If I were just to glue them directly onto the wreath base, they're not going to stick as well. And I just really liked how this looked behind the pinecone flowers. So I go around it once, and then the second time I go around it, I don't wrap it quite as tightly. And when you get back to the beginning, you're just going to take a little dab of glue again and tack that under. It doesn't have to be perfect. I kind of like the rustic feel of it. And then once you have that finished, you're going to set that aside. Now it's time to make your pinecone flowers. So what I do is I grab whatever pinecone I'm using, and once again, these are about 3 inches average in height, and I look at the pinecone to see if there are any parts of it that are already broken. What I'm going to do is cut 2 flowers out of this, and I'm going to just start pulling that middle layer of the pieces of pinecone out with my little jewelry tool. You could also use the flat nose pliers with this. A lot of tutorials had you just go right in with your big cutters and cut the pinecone. I think it's tons harder that way, and you end up smashing a lot of the nice pieces of the pinecone. So by looking to see which section might already be broken a little bit, you can take advantage of a bigger, fuller pinecone flower, and you won't get as many broken pieces of the pinecone. So once I've got a section about 2 layers pulled out, I'm going to use my big cutters and cut it in half. Be careful. The cutters are sharp, and they like to, sometimes when you cut them, the pieces fly across the room, so be careful. And then I'm going to take my bottom half, and I'm just going to, I want it to be about 2 or 3 layers of the pinecones thick, so it'll lay nice and flat against my wreath. So I pull a few of them off with my fingers, and then I'm using, once again, that little jewelry tool to pull off the bottom layers of the pinecone. And what I'll do is I'll flip it to the front and kind of look at it. I don't want to take too many of the bottom layer off, but I want it to lay flat on the bottom, and I want it to be even. So once I've got about 2 layers of the little pieces of pinecone, I'm going to take my big cutters, trim off the back, and this is when those other little scissory ones come in nice and handy. You can do a little bit more detailed, specific work with that. So I'm just cutting off those little pieces on the back. This will help us lay the pinecone flower down flat. And this is what I've got. So you can see that's 2 layers thick, and it's gonna lay nice and flat. Then for the top half, I'm gonna start by pulling off some of the center, and I'm gonna kind of look at it, and then I'm gonna pull some off the bottom layer. Once again, we don't want it to sit super tall. So same idea, I keep flipping it to the front, and then I'm gonna take off a few layers until I have a nice flower. And this is what we've got. So we got 2 flowers out of our pinecone. Now on this one, I actually started at the top to pull it apart because some of it was broken. And then I'm gonna take out, once again, 2 sections in the middle. This will give us the space we need to use the cutters. And so you can see I've got about 2 layers cut out of the middle, and that's where I'm going to put my cutters to cut it in half. Now, one trick I learned that I would highly recommend is I grab a towel and I get my cutters and I put them around my pinecone, and then I cover the pinecone with the towel, and that way when you cut it, they don't fly across the room or you don't get pieces of pinecone in your eye. So that worked really well. And then I trimmed the pinecones just like I did with my first pinecone. And I have 4 lovely flowers, 2 smaller ones and 2 bigger ones. Now the thing that I like about this is some of the flowers that you create are going to curve down while some of them curve up. And we want that because as we're putting this together, you kind of have to think of it like a puzzle, and they're going to fit together nicely if you have some that curve down and some that curve up. So turn on your favorite podcast, catch up on your favorite Netflix show, and make a whole bunch of pinecones. You'll definitely need a lot for this wreath. I can't remember off the top of my head how many I used, but I will put the approximate number of pinecones I used in the description below. Then I grab part of a cardboard box, I'm gonna lay a few of my flowers in it, and then these are just little stickers like labels. And the goal with this part is to cover up the centers. Now you can spray paint the entire flower if you want. I liked how organic leaving the center the color of the pinecone looked. You could also cut out little round pieces of paper. And as you're putting these on, they don't need to stick really well. You just want to cover up that center so it doesn't get completely sprayed. Then I grab my spray paint, give it a good shake, and I give each pinecone maybe 2 layers of the white flat paint. And I like the flat because, once again, I like how it kind of looks organic. If you prefer shine or gloss, definitely go ahead and do that. And this is what we've got. So you can see I also have some little pieces of pine cones. These are some that kind of fell apart while I was cutting them. Save them. You'll want all those tiny little pieces to fill in the blank spots on your wreath. And here's a close-up of this flower. I love how natural it looks. No two flowers are alike, and I just think this turned out so beautiful. Then I'm going to divide them into piles. So I've got my little pieces that kind of broke apart, my smaller flowers, my medium flowers, and my bigger flowers. And I'm going to take 4 of my bigger flowers, and those are going to be our 4 focal points on a wreath. So I kind of lay those out, and I'm going to start at the bottom. And right as I start gluing, I turn my glue gun onto high. I'm really good at burning myself, so if I can get away with not using a really hot glue gun, I do, but this uses a lot of glue. So you can see I used a lot of glue on the back of that flower, and then I'm going to hold it down until that glue sets because we don't want a wreath to fall apart. And then I'm going to start working in sections. So I kind of like to work in 3s. So I found 2 other little flowers that kind of fit, and you can see how I'm tucking some of them under, and the ones that the petals go up on can sit nicely on top. And this is what I was talking about when you're kind of making a puzzle or putting together a puzzle. So you can see I'm holding those down until the glue sets. Then I'm gonna start on the side, and I'm gonna grab one of my other 4 big flowers. I'm gonna glue that down, and then I'm going to work down. So I kind of pull up aside some flowers that kind of work, and I lay them out. But definitely as you're going, you kind of have to play around with the flowers to get them to fit nicely. So I left all of this in as I'm gluing these down just to see how much time I do take moving them around and trying out different flowers in different spots and seeing how they fit together to get all of that burlap covered up. So once again, adding a lot of glue, sliding that little flower in, and I'm going to continue doing that. Now on this flower, I didn't mention before, you can see the bottom is still nice and tight. Some people like to spray paint that side and use that as their flower. It looks more like a chrysanthemum. I like the open flower look, but if you prefer the more closed chrysanthemum, you can definitely do it the other way. And you can see my glue gun is like super hot right now and is smoking. At this point, I usually turn it down to low for a few minutes because it gets really hot. And then once again, just trying different flowers in different spots until I get the right fit. So I've got the one side done down to the bottom. And now I'm going to use my other big focal point flower that goes on the side, glue that down, and same process. Just fitting puzzle pieces together to get those flowers to sit nicely in small groupings. And you can see I'm using, I've got a little piece of a flower there. Those are great because they fit into the tinier spaces a lot better. So don't throw any of these pieces away. So same thing, I work down to the bottom. And this is what we've got. And honestly, if you wanted to just do half of the wreath, I think it looks super pretty just like this. You could just tie a really pretty bow at the top and you're good to go. But I'm going to finish my wreath off. So I'm taking my last big flower that goes at the top, and then I'm going to work down on both sides. So once again, just fitting those together, holding the flowers down until the glue sets. And then what I do at the very end is go through and any empty spots I have or any places that you can really see the burlap, I go in and put little pieces of the petals in. So you can see I've just filled in some of the pieces so it looks nice and full. And look at how beautiful this wreath is. This might be one of my new favorite things. To hang it, I took some floral wire, cut a piece of it, and we're going to kind of make a makeshift needle to thread it through. So I've got my wire, I'm going to take my thread and loop it through that little opening. And then I'm going to push the wire through a spot that's a little bit open on my wreath to hang it. So it was just easier to get the wire through than it was to get the string through. Also, I prefer to use string instead of wire on this part because I feel like the wire, if you were to hook the wire around it, could scratch your door. And so I'd rather use the thread. So then I'm actually going to tie it off really close to the base of the wreath. And here's why. You could just use the string to hang it, but I like the idea of being able to use this wreath for different holidays. So because it's winter, I decided to tie a really pretty kind of turquoisey blue bow on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ribbon and I'm going to slide it underneath that little loop we just made. And then you can tuck the ends of the thread into the back of the wreath. And this way you can change it out for different seasons. So if you wanted to have it for Valentine's Day, you could use red. For Christmas, red and green. You just have more versatility with this wreath. I also don't think that because it's pinecone, it should only be used for winter. I think these are so pretty. And I have some really fun ideas for some spring wreaths. I have a really cute heart pinecone flower wreath I'm working on. And I don't know, you guys, what do you think? I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. Please let me know in the comments below what you think. If you enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do. That would be awesome. And as always, I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.